Welcome back, America. We're with our friend Katie Pavlich, Fox News contributor, Town Hall editor, which is a great site, by the way, Katie. And Katie has great comments to make when I watch her. Just terrific, which is why we like having her here. So I want you to take Katie Pavlich on this Iran issue here. I understand we're negotiating. I think my position is very well known. Paper agreements with the terrorist regime don't tend to work out very well. For some reason, they don't have a code of honor. Now, that said, we have a movement in the country, not just on the left, but others, I don't even know where to put them, who are ideologically isolationist, who are committed to not taking any steps other than diplomatic steps to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Now, why would Iran want a nuclear weapon and intercontinental ballistic missiles other than to blow us off the face of the earth or threaten to blow us off the face of the earth so they can blackmail us? Am I missing something?
Well, the Iranian regime has been very clear about their intentions. They want to destroy the United States of America, and they also want to destroy our ally in the Middle East, which keeps some stability there, which, of course, is Israel. And based on the last agreement, the JCPOA, that President Trump got out of, which was the Obama-Iran deal because it was so abysmal, the Iranians have never done their part and lived up to their agreements on any agreement with the United States. They have always lied. And people ask, well, what does this have to do with America? Well, the Iranian regime, let's not forget, took hostages during the Iranian hostage crisis. They were released when Ronald Reagan came into office and threatened them with force if they did not release them. And then prior to 9/11, Hezbollah, which used to be and still has some branches throughout the world but has been decimated thanks to Israel, was the #1 terrorist organization that murdered Americans in the world. We've had over the past couple of years a number of assassination plots from the Iranians right here on American soil, including against President Donald Trump. So this is not an issue that doesn't affect us. It's not something that is just a faraway problem. And when you give a terrorist regime, the #1 state sponsor in the entire world, the opportunity to build a nuclear weapon, well, they've been clear about saying what they want to do with that kind of weapon, which would be detrimental not to just us, but of course to the world, not to mention destabilizing the entire Middle East. So this is something that the president has talked about very seriously. They're negotiating with the Iranians, trying to come to some conclusion. The president said just this week that he's willing to have these conversations, but if the Iranians don't come to the table and do what he wants, he's also willing to drop some bombs. So we're still in the middle of these negotiations, but also we found out this week that the Iranians have another secret nuclear facility where they are enriching chemicals that are specifically used not for a domestic energy nuclear project, but specifically to build nuclear weapons. And so, of course, we don't have inspectors in Iran at the moment. They're trying to get that maybe through some kind of negotiation and deal. But the Iranians have been clear about the fact that they hate Americans, they want to kill Americans, and they have done so on a very regular basis.
I think that's profoundly put. So what is this ideology that says Israel is going to drag us into a war? Israel's never dragged us into any war. Israel's fought every one of its wars with its own pilots, its own soldiers, its own sailors, with our help with equipment and so forth, dragging us into a war. I mean, Iran wants nuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic missiles, not to hit Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, but to hit us and Europe, to reach us. You don't need intercontinental ballistic missiles for that. And then I ask you, this is a piece of paper. I make a deal with the terrorists. They look at the paper and they laugh.
Yeah.
They're terrorists.
Right.
That's what they are. So I'm having a little trouble understanding this negotiation issue. Am I wrong about that? I mean, what kind of magical deal could be made that would make the terrorists, the Iranians, heel and comply with an agreement?
Well, based on the history of negotiations with the Iranians, again, they've never held up their end of the deal. They have lied about their nuclear ambitions while also telling the world that they want to use nuclear weapons against innocent people and destabilize the entire globe. They are interested in building a caliphate. They have tried to destabilize the Middle East by putting Iranian proxies in Iraq and Syria, by attacking an ally of the United States in Saudi Arabia, by setting up the Houthis in Yemen, by setting up Hezbollah outfits in South America, working with Mexican drug cartels to make money for those terrorist organizations so they can continue to carry out Iran's terror. So this is something that we've seen play out over and over again. The Iranians can't be trusted. They can't be given any kind of paper, as you say, to uphold their end of the deal, not to use their nuclear enrichment for nuclear weapons. There's been a little bit of this talk of allowing them to have a nuclear program for domestic energy production, when we know, based on the information that we have and history in the past of the Israelis going in and taking out intelligence, physical information of them hiding their nuclear ambitions for a nuclear bomb, that their intention is not for domestic nuclear production. They don't care about their own people. They want to build a bomb to destabilize the Middle East further, to go after Israel, and most importantly, to go after the United States. And again, just over the past couple of years, they've tried to assassinate Americans on American soil, including the President of the United States. That is not a good partner in negotiation.
I think one of the things that particularly annoys me, this audience here and my radio audience, I always tell them I will always tell you the truth. I will always tell you what I believe. It's important to have that relationship. You have a big responsibility when you're on TV and when you're on radio. Mm-hmm. So this line that we're hearing from politicians and others, that will allow the Iranians to have a domestic energy, nuclear, civilian program. When we come back, Katie Pavlich, how many countries that have domestic energy nuclear programs are we having to negotiate with to prevent them from building nuclear missiles to hit us? Is this not an absurdity? We'll be right back.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.